Very good evening to one and all present here, respected Professor Murugan Amrithalingam and all dear participants. So it is my great privilege to welcome you all for the last session, and I'm really delighted to introduce Professor Murugan Amrithalingam from IIT Madras. So he has graduated from Government College of Engineering, Salem, and did his masters from IIT Madras and did his PhD from Delft University of Technology, Delft, Netherlands. And he served in various capacities, various I mean institutions, especially presently he is in IIT Madras. He's in the Department of Metallurgical Materials Engineering, and he served as postdoctoral research fellow during 2014-15 in Netherlands, especially on the Foundation for Fundamental Research on Matter, and he served as a research fellow in the same Department of Material Science and Engineering, Delft University of Technology, Netherlands, and did his postdoc research fellow Materials Innovation Institute in the Department of Material Science and Engineering, Delft, Netherlands, and he served as a PhD scholar in the Delft University, and he's worked as a researcher, R&D and scientific services, Tata Steel Jamshedpur, India. So he has a wide experience and has experience in industry as well as in research and teaching. And he got fellowship and awards from Kenneth Easterling Award from International Institute of Welding in 2015, and in the same year he got a Welding Torch of Honor from Delft University of Technology, Netherlands. And he has supervised 2 PhDs, postdoctoral fellows, sorry, and 11 PhDs, and MS by Research 3 and MTech 6. And yes, teaching activities, taught courses for masters, 12 weeks program, various subjects, welding metallurgy, welding process, advanced topics in metal joining, introduction to research, and 2016 massive open online courses, MOOC in NPTEL and SWAM, topics welding of advanced high strength steels for automotive applications. It is 4 weeks course, and welding process 12 weeks course. So organization of scientific meetings, he is the treasurer of INSPANA, okay, International Symposium on Metastable Amorphous and Non-Structured Materials. In 2019, conducted at IIT Chennai, Madras, okay, and organizing committee member of International Congress 2017, organizer and treasurer of International Research Scholar Symposium, conducted at IIT Madras, and conducted 8 welding and additive manufacturing workshops. So institutional responsibilities is the heading the joining additive manufacturing laboratory, Department of Materials and Metallurgical Engineering, IIT Madras, and he was lab in charge from 2019. He is lab in charge, the physical metallurgy lab, and lab in charge in physical metallurgy lab from 2019, and member of Masters and PhD Admission Committee, member of Institute Grievance Committee, member of Faculty Search Committee, and lab in charge of Global Thermomechanical Simulation System. So a lot of yes, commission, many other things, council member, deputy chairman, all those things. Is a membership in scientific and professional bodies, member of IIW, life member IIM, and life member Indian Welding Society. So expert member and delegate International Institute of Welding, commissions various, he has done, served various things, and track record, he has total number of international referred journals 27, book chapters 3, full papers in reference conferences 11, patent granted 1. So I really, it is a great pleasure to welcome Professor Amrithalingam, and especially he has consented. See, he is actually tomorrow he is conducting JE. Still, he has agreed, and with a kind of dedication. Really, I really appreciate. I thank him on behalf of Robotics and Automation Engineering Department and Center of Excellence in Engineering, Welding and Technology, PhD in Technology. Sir, thanks, sir. Thanks. I just hand over to session to you. Sir.
Yeah, thanks, Professor Murugan, for inviting me. And first of all, apologies for keeping you long over the weekend. And sorry, I could not help because the JE has happened all of a sudden. The government, and as per the Supreme Court order, wanted to conduct JE. you have been hearing the news as well, right? So we, at the last minute, within 2 weeks, we had to make all the arrangements for JEE, Joint Entrance Examinations. So I agreed to give a talk on Friday afternoon from 2 to 3:30. But no, I had to start this morning from Palakkad, from Chennai to Palakkad. So I'm right now sitting in a hotel room in Palakkad. Tomorrow and day after, we have JEE exams. Since I committed, no, I wanted to give this talk, and I don't want to disappoint you, especially Professor Murugan. So therefore, again, my sincere apologies for giving this lecture a bit late. And I hope you can learn something from me. I try my best to keep you active until late in the evening, right? So thanks, Professor Murugan, once again for inviting me to give this lecture on FDB program. So the topic I'm going to give is one of the new and very active research topics worldwide. And if you look at the number of papers that are getting published over the year, especially in 2020, the number of papers in IT manufacturing by far exceeds any other topics that are currently researched. Okay, and I request if you can mute your microphone, that'll be better. Yeah, good. Thank you. Am I loud and clear? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Okay. So we'll straight away dive into the topic I'm going to give. And so the topic what I initially wanted to give was on more of a mathematical modeling topic. So then on the way, when I was coming in the car, I realized that it's going to be late in the evening. So I slightly tweaked the topic. In such that, I can also give some introduction about additive manufacturing and the why path planning is very important. And what are the tools we use for path planning? I was also told this FTP is primarily on robotic programming and robotic controls. So what is the role of robots and how the robots parts should be programmed in order to achieve require mechanical properties of the additive manufacturing component. So mechanical properties involve not only the metallurgical characterization and the microstructural evolution. The mechanical properties can also get affected by the defects we generate. Okay, so the defect generation, especially in a multi-layer deposition, when we do it in IT manufacturing, is strongly influenced by the way we create each layer. So therefore, I thought, okay, let's give the introduction about the IT manufacturing and the process chain of IT manufacturing, how we proceed to create a new component, and the role of path planning and how we can optimize the path to produce a component with required geometry with necessary mechanical and in-service conditions required. Right, so I hope you see my slides. We'll continue. So this lecture I just planned for an hour. So if it exceeds, maybe not more than 10 minutes, over an hour. Okay, so the topic I'm going to give is on optimization of path planning in additive manufacturing. Okay, so path planning is mainly we carry out to effectively fill a given slice. Right? Good. So Professor Murugan already introduced me. So my name is Murugan Amirthalingam. So I work in the Department of Metallurgical and Materials Engineering in IIT Madras. And some of you may know me. Good. So before going into detail, so a couple of slides on IIT manufacturing, even though you know already. So I'll just make this opportunity, take this opportunity to introduce some basics about this process and types of processes and the process chain. So IT manufacturing, by definition, as per the ASTM standard, when we discussed about defining the process terminology in last International Institute of Welding meeting, and this is what coined in IIW term, and later it became ISO document. So this is nothing but process of joining materials to make parts directly from its 3D CAD data, right? I'm sorry about it. Sorry, something has happened. I'll just restart the lecture. Yeah, so can you see my screen again? Someone raise a voice.
Yes, sir, we can hear, sir.
Slightly you can
Okay,
increase
very
the
good. So,
sound, sir. That's all. Visible.
what is that, sir?
Slightly you can increase the sound, voice, audio, slightly. That's all.
Okay.
Good, sir.
Yeah, can you
Yes.
hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, fine, good.
Fine,
So
sir.
the IP manufacturing, so we create a component directly from its CAD data, generally layer by layer, right? So in subtractive manufacturing, when you make a casting and forging and machining, so we don't do this process, right? So we create an object and then do a post processing like machining or surface finishing to manufacture a component for in service application. Whereas in additive manufacturing, so we create an object directly from its CAD data, okay, usually by layer, and this layer by layer production requires careful manipulation of the CAD data to create a two-dimensional layer, and then subsequently to generate the layer, and we need to fill the layer based on the optimization we do to create that required layer, so that the component can be produced by adding multiple layers to get the final 3D component. And this process is not new. I mean, people talk about additive manufacturing or 3D printing, and we have been doing this process for over several decades. So the process of creating a layer by layer deposition is nothing but welding. Okay, so we do multi-pass welding, right? So multi-pass welding with with a consumable wire, right? So and then we deposit and bead on bead. That is a multi-pass deposition, right? So in a welding, the boundary conditions what we have, the mechanical as a thermal boundary conditions are different than what we have in the additive manufacturing process. So we used to call the welding-based additive manufacturing as a weld overlay, right? And now no, the terms are changed because we can also use the same process, like the welding heat source, arc and plasma, or laser with a wire or powder. Okay, so we can also create layer by layer object, right? So the people used to call this a rapid prototyping technique or rapid manufacturing. Okay, or solid freeform fabrication, especially if we use a friction deposition. Okay, so tools which we use it for friction welding. Okay, and the friction stir welding. And so those welding process can also be used to perform layer by layer deposition. So and those processes known as solid freeform fabrication, and there are digital manufacturing, 3D printing, non-assembly manufacturing. So people call with various names on this process, but all of them denote the same technique, what we refer academically and more globally as additive manufacturing. Good. So the basic principle, what I talked about in the definition is, instead of creating a component, suppose if you want to make a spherical component, like it's shown over here, okay, so casting a square, a cube, and subsequently we'll have to machine it off to get a spherical component. So it involves a lot of machining and defect-free casting, for example. Whereas if you use additive manufacturing, so we create a spherical object, first slicing the sphere into several layers, and we create layer by layer, and the layer upon layer is added to visualize as sphere, right? So the advantage of this process is we can create a component directly from its CAD data, and we can also create a complex geometries by carefully manipulating the slicing and path planning programs. And we can also control the mechanical properties layer by layer. And if you want to change the layer composition in between to introduce some functional gradation, if one layer should be in different composition than other layer, that is also possible. Therefore, this process now is becoming very attractive, okay, to produce components with enhanced in-service performance. Like for example, in our group, we have been working on developing components for aerospace applications, naval applications with the mechanical properties far better than what we make it with conventional subtractive manufacturing, right? So the change what we look at the additive manufacturing is going to bring, okay, so require a lot of careful understanding of physics of this process, and research on how to optimize the process parameter so that the component what you're going to get out of IT manufacturing is performing better than the conventionally made component. If it is going to fail much earlier than the conventional manufacturing component doing in service, then the IT manufacturing component doesn't really find any commercial application. So we have been working on to improving to achieve the required in-service performance by carefully manipulating the physics of the process. So this lecture, I'm going to talk about one of such optimization we have been doing is on the path planning. Okay, so that's what now we are going to learn in this lecture. Good. So the process is very simple. You are all mechanical engineer, right? So mechanical engineers, you understand the process much better than I'm a metallurgist. So it is a very straightforward process. Hello? Hello?
Sir, sir.
Yeah, someone is interrupting. Someone is trying to ask question. Okay, fine. So maybe some disturbance. Okay, fine. So we'll continue. And if you look at, as I said, this process is not new. I mean, welding-based processes, they've been there, from 60s. But we did not call it as an additive manufacturing process. But if you look at the first real 3D printing, was patented in 1981 by Charles Hull. So Charles Hull in US. Okay, so he patented the first process where he produced a prototype from a polymer using a technique what is known as vat polymerization technique. Okay, he named the technique as a lithography, stereolithography process. So that is the first patent granted on this process where an object is fabricated from its CAD data directly layer upon layer. Okay, so that is what has happened in 1981, and stereolithography process is based on a technique what is known as vat polymerization. Right, so the Charles Hull, then he developed an equipment which can produce a polymer-based prototypes. Okay, so he started a company which is known as 3D Systems, and which is one of the leading 3D printing manufacturing equipment manufacturing company. Good. So from 1981 and 85, a lot of people are trying to produce components for prototypes using a polymer-based processor. And the 3D system, again, Charles Hull in the early 90s developed the first 3D printer, which can be used for metals and alloys. Okay, so that was the first time the patent was given in 90. And from 90, there a lot of attraction was given to develop the additive manufacturing process for metals and alloys. Okay, so there were a lot of developments in terms of the materials that can be printed directly from its CAD data. So after polymers, the vat polymerization process. Okay, so the lasers were used to sinter the powders in a powder bed fusion system, and lasers were used to melt and deposit the feedstock, generally it's powder or wire, and to create a layer by layer structure. So in late 90s and the last 10 years, a lot of development took place to optimize the process such that the end component what you're going to produce are going to meet directly the service condition. Okay, so we right now are in the situation where the academic research is getting translated into commercial research to produce induced components. So right now we see additive manufacturing is in a research perspective reaching its prime value, and the statistics say that recent article from American Welding Society, it says that by 2040, almost 50% of the components used in engineering application would at least have one component, one part made of using additive manufacturing. So that's what we are actually going towards the use of additive manufacturing for the future. So it says that by 2040, 50% of the engineering components used would at least have a single part, at least one part made using additive manufacturing. Yeah. So we are moving towards that. Can you mute, please? Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
this is the timeline.
I want again further.
What? Hello?
Hello, sir. Can you please?
Please don't disturb, please. Mute your microphone, please. Don't disturb, please.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so the timeline what we have just discussed is 1981. The first paper was published in Japan, and the patent was given to Charles Hull on stereolithography using photopolymers, the process known as VAT polymerization process. Right, and 1992, the first 3D system metal equipment was marketed, right, and subsequently in late 90s, we have seen the first metal additive manufacturing process used to produce a commercial component. Okay, so right now we are actually in the prime, as I said. We have been talking about equipment used for various engineering allies, and subsequently using the engineering component for extreme applications. Right now we are working on developing printing parameters to produce components for our hypersonic missiles. Okay, so we are going towards the use of components which are made using additive manufacturing, okay, for extreme applications, for space, for defense, for energy generation. Okay, so therefore, we are looking at the growth of additive manufacturing in India as well as elsewhere. In the next 10 years, it's going to open up significantly. So the summer state of that, I want to try AM a couple of slides, and subsequently, we'll move on to the process chain. So these slides, they show about right now what is actually AM, why is it prime, right? So the top, if you follow my cursor, so this image, what is shown over here is these bioparts, 3D printed bioparts. Okay, so bioparts printed using live cells. Okay, so the process right now, what they actually use is mainly for animals. Okay, to replace, to test the efficacy of additive manufacturing to produce the parts for transplant surgery. Okay, you see in the kidney and the air and the bones. Okay, so this is actually really happening right now. So the application what we are actually looking towards commercializing are the processes what you see over here, the replacement. The advantage of the AM, it is really beneficial for these applications because we create the end use component directly from digital data, isn't it? So the one component, unique data, unique design can be reproduced to produce the component which exactly fits the replacement, right? So the processes what you see over here, which is actually in a custom made processes, and the rehabilitation time, because of the fact that the process is what made using additive manufacturing is very unique and custom made, the rehabilitation time decreases significantly, right? So we already we see these kind of processes made for war veterans, the soldiers, especially in Europe. A lot of research is going on to develop custom made the processes, right? And the other interesting application of AM, what you see over here, is to develop the implants, the facial reconstructive implants, right? So right now in IIT Madras, we are working on with Norwegian collaborators to develop the implants which are very specific for a human being, right? So because our body is different, right? So each one of us has a different skull, a different bone chemistry, different morphology. Especially when we undergo when someone gets a trauma. Okay, so the implant has to be developed to be used within no time, because there is no time when the trauma happens, the surgery has to take place. So the developing a custom-made implant by conventional way is extremely difficult. Like, we need to first get the part made using a casting process or a rolling process, subsequently commission it and then finish it to get the required design, right? Whereas in IT manufacturing, once you have the CT scan data, okay, or MRI data, so we can use that to create a custom-made implant readily using an IT manufacturing. So we are trying to develop techniques to produce these custom-made facial reconstructive implants, especially for children. Okay, for children, the skull is so so for the children, so it is extremely important to develop these techniques because of the fact that it's very critical, life-saving surgery. So one of the objectives of our research is to develop the process parameters to develop the custom-made implants, and the IT manufacturing components are already used in aerospace applications. So this is a Siemens impeller, okay, so used for aircraft engine, and these blades are all already additively manufactured. And this is an GE cooling pattern, okay, so developed for an effective heat transfer. You see the complexities in design, okay, so extremely complex the cooling channels they created so that the efficiency of the heat transfer can be improved significantly. And this kind of design can never be produced using conventional manufacturing methods. So some of other examples of IT manufacturing. So this IT manufacturing car, I just gave it for fun, this slide, and some processes again with the decoration. So they are all IT manufactured. Of course, this is an gold. Right now, UOS, a company, they also produce equipment to print jewels, okay, from gold powders. Okay, so you can print your own jewels in a custom-made design. And this is in a house. It's a 3D printer, IT manufactured, right? So we love to see this as a very attractive technique, especially for calamities. Okay, so for disaster management, to instantly provide shelters and to help our soldiers who are actually serving in the border. If they want to build a shelter, so it can be built within no time using a layer by layer technique. Okay, in IIT Madras, we have a similar structure built already, okay, using an IT manufacturing to demonstrate that the technique what we have can be really used in use application. Good. So with that, we'll move on to the actual processes. If you look at the IT manufacturing per se, there are only 7 processes. Okay, so we can categorize these IT manufacturing processes into 7 categories. Okay, so we'll quickly look at what are these processes, and then we'll move on to the topic, which is slicing and part planning. Okay, so the first process is invented, which is known as the vat polymerization process. So where it actually, we have a photopolymer. Okay, photopolymer is contained in a vat. Vat means just a sort of a container. Okay, so this photopolymer, so when the light falls onto this photopolymer, okay, it gets cured. Okay, so like a paint. Okay, so you have wall paint. So wall paint cures when the light falls on it, isn't it? Because it has a photo initiator. So when the photons, light photons fall onto this photopolymer hardens by the light-based curing. Right, so we use that technique. So if you have a photopolymer in a container, if a laser or an UV light falls onto this location, and only that location gets cured, right? And we can use the technique to selectively cure the part of photopolymer kept in the vat. Okay, so in this process, we have a photopolymer in a vat, and subsequently we pass the laser light or UV light selectively so that the layer, which is actually get the photons, cures, solidifies, and subsequently when we lower the vat and fill with more photopolymer in the next layer, and again we can fill the second layer, and then this layer gets attached to the previously solidified layer, and then we can manipulate the scanning strategy, or we can plan the path of the laser in such that now we can create a complex shape by selectively curing the layer. Okay, so this technique is known as vat polymerization technique. right? And wet polymerization technique is also commercially known as SLA, stereolithography apparatus. So that is the commercial term given by 3D systems. But the more academic generic term is wet polymerization technique. Okay, so the second technique of IT manufacturing is also known as various names. Okay, but we call all the processes which actually use a powder bed and the laser or electron beam as a powder bed fusion system. Okay, in the powder bed fusion system, okay, we have a container filled with the powder. So, and heat source scans on the powder. So once the heat source interact with the powder either melts and solidify to create a solid bead, or these powders can also get sintered to create a solid bead. Okay, and this technique is commercially known as SLM, selective laser melting, direct DMLS, direct laser DLMS, okay, direct laser metal sintering, and various other names. Okay, so, but the academic term we call it as a powder bed fusion system. Okay, so SLM, DMLS. Okay, all these techniques they commercially call that. All of them fall under powder bed fusion system, where we have a metal powder contained in a small bed, and we have the light source or the heat source, either can be arc or plasma or laser or electron beam. Okay, carefully manipulated over the powder bed, and the powder melts at the location where the laser falls, and subsequently either solidifies or sinters to create the bead. Okay, and the third process on IT manufacturing is known as material extrusion process. In the material extrusion process, we have a feedstock, okay, and this feedstock is extruded through a nozzle, and this extruded feedstock is actually deposited onto a substrate. Okay, and the extrusion nozzles, okay, made to travel onto a substrate, and when the extrusion happens, so we create a bead, and subsequently a bead can be overlapped to create a layer. And this technique is used widely for polymer-based IT manufacturing process, right? And this is also known as FLD, okay? So the filament extrusion processes, so filament-based processes, okay? So these are all work under principle of material extrusion, okay? So FDM, for example, fused deposition modeling, okay? So FDM is also a part of a material extrusion process where a feedstock wire is extruded, and this extruded feedstock gets deposited onto substrate, and it solidifies subsequently to create a solid object. And the fourth process is the material jetting process, in which liquid feedstock is jetted onto a substrate, okay, similar to our inkjet printing. Okay, so liquid feedstock is actually made to travel through a nozzle or orifice, and the droplet is deposited onto a substrate the way we want to create a layer. Okay, so the ejected or jetted droplet, okay, either it gets cured by photopolymerization reaction or by natural curing. Okay, so like a wax. And this process is very attractive because the feedstock is very liquid, and then we can create a very small, tiny layers because we can control the jet we are actually ejecting out by the material jetting process, similar to what you do in inkjet process. Okay, and the fifth process is the binder jetting process that is available. It is similar to powder bed fusion system, whereas in binder jetting compared to the powder bed system, so we jet the binder onto a powder bed. Okay, so what you do, powder bed is actually kept, okay, either it can be ceramic or metal powder, and the binder is actually added selectively to the locations where we have to have a binding action, a curing action. Okay, and then subsequently we create a green part, and the green part can be taken out and cured to create a brown part, and brown part can be used after infiltration, for example, as a final component, right? And this process now is seen as a very attractive process to create sand molds. Okay, the sand molds with the complex, intricate channels and geometries can be created very easily using the binder jetting process. So to create a mold in a green sand molding, Okay, so it requires a patent, a tool, right? And subsequently, to create an intricate channels inside, it's very, very challenging. Okay, so we can use the binder jetting because we can create a complicated, intricate channels by layer, adding the binder and subsequently sand cubes, and we can create the pattern. Okay, and the sixth process is a solid state process, which is known as a sheet lamination process. Okay, in which what we do is, so we use an ultrasonic vibration to join two sheets. Okay, so it's similar to ultrasonic welding. Okay, so here what we do is, so we create a laminate, and then the laminates are added layer by layer, and these laminates are joined by an ultrasonic transducer. So this ultrasonic welding is carried out locally to create a coalescence between the interface, and subsequently we create a multi-layer laminate, and subsequently we machine it off the location that we don't want to create a final component layer by layer. And this process is taking place in solid state. Okay, therefore this process can be used to produce smart components. We can also embed some of the sensors so that we can create a smart components. For example, I've seen one company is making a smart brake shoe. Okay, so brake shoe for an automotive vehicle, right, with a sensor, force sensor in it. Okay, so if someone abruptly brakes, and immediately warning comes into the dashboard of the car that the braking performance is not good. Okay, because the sensor which is added in the brake shoe, which is created by the sheet lamination process, okay, can identify the force balance and immediately can warn the driver. Okay, and we can also attach thermocouples, okay, in this in the component to identify the temperature at the component immediately. So these kind of applications sheet lamination process is used. And I do have a video because of the time constraint. I don't want to play every video, but if you want, you can also look at some of my lectures on YouTube and get some more information on this. Good. So the seventh process, it is available, which is also similar to what we do in welding. It is known as directed energy deposition process. So in direct energy deposition process, we have a heat source and a feedstock, either a powder or a wire. The powder and wire is added, and the heat source it can be arc, okay, it can be plasma, or it can be laser, it can be electron beam. Okay, so this heat source melts the wire or the powder which is getting deposited. Subsequently, molten droplet is transferred to the base material. Okay, this is similar to what you have in the welding. So during this deposition, we can move the heat source along with the feedstock so that the droplet can be deposited on the locations where we want to get the layer built. Okay, so this process is actually known as direct energy deposition. And a lot of commercial names are available, like for example, LENS, okay, laser enable net shaping. So it is a direct energy deposition process, right? Or VAM, wire arc additive manufacturing. That is a direct energy deposition. Or EBAM. EBAM is a CIAC's brand name, okay, electron beam additive manufacturing process. Okay, or electron beam melting process. Okay, so they are all, we can call it as a direct energy deposition process. Good. So if you look at all the 7 processes, so we have a common process chain. Okay, so first we identify what material we want to use to make a component in a given technique. Okay, so we identify what process can be effectively used to create a component out of this material. So that is our first exercise we do. For example, if you want to build an acrylic prototype, okay, you cannot use a direct energy deposition system, DED. Okay, you can never produce that because polymers are very difficult to control their melting behavior with the laser or electron beam. Okay, so to produce a prototype using an acrylic, best we can use the wet polymerization process. Okay, similarly, we do a careful analysis based on the materials and the surface quality, what we expect from the final printed components. We can identify which process can be best suited to produce in these components. Right, so once we identify the materials and the process what we want to use, so then we do extensive mathematical modeling to understand the material behavior when we do printing. Okay, including the process simulation. So when you are depositing in a single bead how the bead is going to shrink when the bead either polymerize or during solidification, right? So that now we can adjust the actual deposition speed to create a required geometry of the bead. Okay, and now when you do multi-pass deposition in thin wall, because of the excessive heat we actually add, it can also induce the residual stress and distortion. Okay, and we need to correct that distortion as and when we build. Okay, because why do you need to machine it up later? So we can also correct the distortion when we build layer by layer. So we do extensive mathematical modeling to understand the process performance and the results of distortion, right? So one of the exercises we actually do that is also the calculation based on the results of distortion evolution to identify the effective path in which we can fill a layer. Okay, so the second exercise we do, and subsequently based on the product complexity and productivity, so we identify the actual robot programming we want to use, and subsequently we carry out based on the robotic capabilities the slicing and path planning. Okay, this is one of the important activities which we are going to talk about today, how effectively you can slice a given 3D CAD drawing into a two-dimensional layer. Okay, and the slicing is extremely important, not only to get the geometrical accuracy, also to get a required surface finish. Okay, so once we have a slicing to create a two-dimensional layer, okay, so we can now create a robotic path based on the optimization, so that now we have excellent mechanical properties by carefully controlling the thermal mechanical boundary conditions and to avoid the defect formation. So once we have paths generated, so we can generate G and M code and we give it to the robot, and subsequently we can also monitor and we print the component and take it out. If any post-processing is required, we can do that. After we do and say post-print quality control. So this is the process chain what we use, right? And see, most of these steps require both knowledge on materials and the process, the heat source behavior, and the mechanical boundary conditions that are prevailing during this process, right? So we make use of all the fundamental knowledge that are available in welding to generate the effective ways to create component using additive manufacturing. Good. So this is a simple process chain in visualize using pictures, right? So we have, suppose you want to print a cup, okay? So to drink coffee using an additive manufacturing. So we have a CAD data. The first thing what you do is, so from the CAD data, we convert the CAD data into what is known as STL file, okay? The standard tessellation language file, okay, STL file, where we create from the CAD data an STL file by just filling this CAD data into a lot of triangles. Okay, so we fill that with the triangles, right? And we convert using this process 3D data into two-dimensional data. Okay, so by filling the entire geometry of a 3D structure into a triangle, and we can design the entire shape by a two-dimensional data set. Okay, so by declaring the vertices of the triangle and the surface normal of triangle, okay, each location, each point in the geometry can be carefully constructed into a two-dimensional data. Okay, so once we have a STL conversion, okay, and then what we do is we slice the STL file into layer by layer, okay, and subsequently once a layer is created, okay, and we can plan how we are going to fill that layer to create the layer, okay, by again optimizing the paths, so that we can fill one layer and subsequently we can fill the feedstock, or we can lower the axis of the build direction, so that we can create the next layer. So this is the actual process chain we carry out, and subsequently we can create a very nice coffee cup to drink warm coffee. Okay. So this is, and again, visualization, what is shown over here. We have a CAD model, which is actually converted into an STL file, where we fill it with triangles and we do a slicing. And once we create a slice, single slice, we carefully understand how this slice can be filled using a path planning. And once you know the paths, you can generate robotic code and you can fill. And finally, after post processing, and the final component can be printed. Okay. So this is an example of an STL conversion. We have a CAD to STL. So STL file contains just a triangle. Okay, each triangle, okay, is dictated in the STL file by the 3 vertices and its surface normal. Okay, so vertex 3 vertices, okay, and the surface normal, which is the facet normal. And if you know the location of the vertices and the surface normal, we can actually locate the actual XY coordinates of a triangle. And this is very important file format because this converts the 3D data into 2D data. Okay, so once you have a 2D data, it's easy to slice because each layer is actually declared only by a 2-dimensional data information, right? So subsequently, once you have a STL file, we can slice it. And the slicing can be, uniform slicing or an adaptive slicing. Okay, that will come back to that later. Okay, so the uniform slicing, we slice it through into a layer thickness or constant across the geometry, or we can also do an adaptive slicing. Okay, so the adaptive slicing is also beneficial when we have a component with very varying degree of curvature. Okay, so then the adaptive slicing is very beneficial to achieve a good surface finish to avoid so-called staircase effect. Okay, and once you have an adaptive slicing, so we can have a slice component identified with respect to the actual interaction of the cutting plane with the triangles which we described in STL file. So once you know the interaction points, and we can connect the interaction point to create the actual layer. Okay, so this is an example of an STL file, the triangulation, and it shows the uniform slicing, where the slicing is uniform, or you can also make adaptive slicing so that the curvatures are obtained without much deviation from its geometry. Okay. So the adaptive slicing generally we do to achieve a good surface finish and to get a nice geometrical accuracy as required by the induced component. Say for example, you have a curvature, something like that, and if you have a constant layer thickness, so then you end up getting a staircases, isn't it? So that's what you call staircase effect. So we use an algorithm to achieve required the geometry and surface finish by using an adaptive slices. Okay, you see that in how effectively adaptive slicing can be used. Okay, to get the required geometry generated and when we print layer by layer. Okay, so the slicing can also be multi-directional. Right now, this is an unidirectional slicing, so we do it in only one direction. So if you are doing it, and then if you have overhanging features, then we have a problem, isn't it? Suppose if you want to produce such a component for end use, if you do a uniform slicing, so then we'll have to have a support structure made. Otherwise, we can't generate an overhanging feature. So for that, what we do is we do what we call a multi-directional slicing. So we slice it up and we change the direction of the slicing, and so that we have avoided the support features, support structure requirement to generate the overhang feature. The only problem here is when you're actually using a laser or electron beam as a heat source and downhand. Okay, so we'll have to make sure that the component is tilted into the correct angle using a 2-axis rotation table. Okay, so that is the best way we do it. Okay, because when you manipulate the heat source, okay, the heat transfer and the droplet transfer from the, especially in DED processes, is very tricky. Okay, so therefore the adaptive slicing for DED processes always carried out with a 7-axis system. Okay, so and this process, the adaptive slicing generally is not used for powder bed systems because you already have a support of a powder, isn't it? Right? So multi-directional slicing primarily is advantageous when you use in a DED process. Okay, so these are some of the examples of the multi-directional slicing, and this is a gland made using Cornell 625, where we can develop using a DED process and a slicing, and we also have an adaptive slicing and the multi-directional slicing, and this can be realized very easily. Right? So once you have a slicing, right? So then we'll have to identify for each slice layer how we are going to fill each slice layer by carefully understanding the path planning algorithms, right? So this is again to summarize slicing process. We have a shape, okay, wherein we have a cube with a void inside. We fill it with triangle, and then slice it, identify the interaction of the slices with the triangles, and we connect all these interaction points, and you get the actual slice layer. Okay, so once you have a slice layer, so then we'll have to fill that slice layer with beads, isn't it? So the laser or the electron beam heat source, so to move either in the powder bed system or in the DD system, or even like any other manufacturing process like material jetting or binder jetting to create a bead. Okay, so some of the nomenclatures before going to the path planning. So the bead is nothing but the actual the geometry of the single deposit we create. Okay, so the bead height and width, and this is substrate. Suppose if we have a powder bed and the heat source, and we create a molten layer and subsequently solidify. So that is what we create over here, and this is the actual bead we call it, right? And so bead and height and width is determined by the heat source characteristics and the heat transfer prevailing in the atmosphere, right? So we can calculate from the physics for a given laser heat source. So what is the material we are going to melt, and subsequently when the melt solidifies, so what is the actual geometrical shrinkage is going to undergo, and now we can create the actual the bead in computer, okay, using a thermodynamic based solidification model with information about the fluid flow. Okay, so we can understand what is the bead geometry. I'm not going to go in detail about how we are going to calculate the bead geometry, but once you have the beads, okay, so we can identify. So then to optimize how the deposit is going to take place, right? So some basic understanding in the multi-layer deposition is the first thing is, we'll have to make sure that if you understand the bead geometry, height and width, right? And we calculate the overlapping distances required to achieve a flat layer, right? So that is what is known as the step over distance, or in a commercial term, hatch distance. So hatch distance are calculated. So once we calculate the bead width and height, and the next layer when we deposit, so this is the first bead, and the second bead we deposit, and the overlapping distance should be such that the critical valley and the overlapping areas will be the same. Okay, so if we have that, if the overlapping distance is too small, so then we'll have a lot of valleys left, and if overlapping distance too much, okay, so then we may have what is known as humping. Okay, so then the dimensional accuracy is hampered. So again, so we calculate from the bead height and width characteristics the overlapping area required, so that we get a very nice the flat surface, what is shown over here in the C. So if the step over distance is too high, so then we have a valley generated by the inadequate overlapping, and if overlapping is too much, so then again we have a dissimilar beads created, and if the D is very small, then you'll have a humping bead created. So generally we identify what is the critical step over distance or hatch distance, right, to get the overlapping such that the critical valley is equal to the overlapping area. And the thumb rule first we begin with is when the step over distance is about 70% of the width of the layer. Okay, so if we create a 5 mm bead or a 10 mm bead, okay, so the overlapping distance, okay, so must be 30%. So 0.3 mm overlapping distance what we maintain. Okay, good. So once we identify the bead geometry, so next is how are you going to fill a given layer? Okay, so that's how the path planning comes in, right? So the path planning, okay, we still have some more time, right? So is to fill this slice we create, okay, without any crossover, okay, and the defect-free deposition should be made. So we'll have to create a robotic path to fill the slice layer, Okay, so without crossing over. If you cross over locally, we are actually increasing the width, isn't it? And during this process, we should also avoid frequent start and stop. Okay, so if you start and without filling the entire layer, okay, if you stop it in between, then you create locally some defect. Especially when you are using electron beam or arc plasma, the start and stop would always create instability in the start and stop location, and that is a defect, isn't it? So that has to be avoided. And the third consideration is the geometrical accuracy. Okay, should be achieved as good as possible to minimize post-processing machining. Because, for example, here if you don't have a proper overlapping distances, okay, so then we get an hump or valleys, and this is very bad because you have to machine it off, isn't it? So somewhere over here, a lot of material is wasted. So then the benefit of additive manufacturing is not actually made. So some of the consideration we do is to fill the given layer. Okay, so either it can be filled raster or zigzag or contour or spiral or mix of all these parts. Okay, I'll just give some of the examples of this path planning we do, and then how we optimize this path. Okay, so based on the mathematical modeling. So the raster path is very simple. So raster path, what you do is we divide the area we want to fill. Okay, and we start filling by using a simple rastering. So if it is an X and Y, so we move either in the Y direction and get one bead made, and then move in X direction, make another bead. Okay, so you can make a raster continuously. Okay, and so this process requires a start and stop, isn't it? So suppose if you're doing unidirectional or bidirectional, okay, so you'll have to make sure that so unidirectional case, it moves in only one direction. Okay, and subsequently we can fill the area you want to create. Okay, and this is not that an effective process. Okay, the rastering, and you can create a lot of residual stress that we'll see in subsequent slides. Okay, and zigzag path, instead of moving in one unidirectional, so we can also move in a zigzag, like in X and Y. Okay, so it can create a continuous path without stop and stop, and with very high productivity. But this is a nasty process because we end up accumulating heat inside the component because of the continuous movement of the heat in a given location. Okay, and the accuracy in the outline is very poor. Suppose if you have a nonlinear geometries, then the zigzag path can create a poor accuracy. Okay. The spiral path, so as a mechanical engineer, you already been using this spiral path for machining, while it's for CNC machinings, where we milling we do it in a spiral path, and this path can also be used mainly for certain geometries, which require a very nonlinear surfaces. And the most common the paths we take in additive manufacturing is known as a contour path. So the contour path, in some using a conventional zigzag or raster or the spiral path. So we fill, suppose this is the layer, and we fill it always parallel to the contour. Okay. So for example, here the layer is actually generated by just moving the heat source parallel to the contour all the time. Okay. So this process is slightly advantageous to achieve dimensional accuracy, but it creates a lot of voids, especially when you fill at the middle, you always have irregularity due to the lack of fusion. Okay. You can get a good productivity, but achieving a good defect-free component is very difficult using a contour path. Okay. So we can also use a hybrid methodology where you have a first contour path made to get the contours achieved, and then subsequently you do a zigzag path to generate the final layer. And this is good in terms of achieving the geometrical accuracy, but this is an extremely bad because when you're doing a zigzag, you end up containing the heat in the component, and that can lead to a lot of damage in terms of microstructure and the residual stress. Okay, so when you use the hybrid path. So based on these disadvantages, what we looked at in all the processes, Okay, so people thought about that and came up with the most effective way of filling the layer, which is actually known as an matte path. So matte path is actually very simple to understand. So instead of actually creating a component by following a contour, and if you follow the contour, we end up producing a lack of fusion at the middle, isn't it? So you may have voids created at the middle. So instead of what we, yeah. So in the matte, what you do is, we generally identify the medial axis of the component, okay? And instead of starting from the outside, we actually start from the medial axis, okay? So we'll start from the middle, in the medial axis, and subsequently from the inside, we go out and then complete the entire layer. So filling from inside to outside. So that's what we call it as an adaptive medial axis transformation, where we can start from the medial axis at the middle, and subsequently we can start filling it up layer by layer. And this can also be adaptive beads, and we can reach the contour once we have identified the medial axis and follow the medial axis, okay, continuously. So this is what the state of the art right now in path planning, where we can generate a defect-free component in a DED process, or even any other process which requires good dimensional accuracy. So one of the examples what we do in using medial axis transformation path for to generate, this is a reinforced panel for aircraft, okay, fuselage. Okay, so what we have is first we have the geometry and the medial axis identified, and then we follow the medial axis from the inside to outside to fill the entire layer by following its medial axis. Okay, so this is right now used in the most of the DED-based processes to achieve a good dimensional accuracy. So these are one of the examples of matte. Suppose if you want to create a complex geometry, okay, we identify the medial axis, and then we start from the inside and follow the medial axis, and then we'll end up generating the component with very good accuracy. Okay, so the medial axis transformation can also be used in adaptive mode. Suppose if you have this complex geometry, in the contour path planning, you always have a void at the middle, isn't it? A gap, right? So we start from the middle, and then we use adaptive deposition to create very nice the adaptive path to get the component required for the engineering application. Good. I'll quickly just show you the modeling activities we do based on the matte programming. Okay, and then we'll wind up the talk. Okay, good. So in the path planning simulations, so first we need to understand the actual problems, and we construct thermal and mechanical model, and we solve for a given heat source. So how the heat is evolving, so when the deposit is made, and subsequently using a mechanical properties, thermal temperature and mechanical properties, and the boundary conditions, we can calculate the residual stress development. Okay, I'll show you some of the example simulations what we do. For example, when you do a raster scan, or a medial axis transformation scan, or an zigzag scans, okay, or island type zigzag scans, right? So how we can get the actual path identified using an FEM-based model. So this is actually used for a laser deposition process, DED process, where we have a heat source model, and then we can optimize the path. And during this deposition, you can identify, say, for example, when you fill it uniaxial deposition. Okay, so how the heat is actually accumulated, and when you do an uniaxial, biaxial deposition, okay, so how the heat transfer affects the temperature distribution of the bead, right? So that can be calculated. So based on the thermophysical properties and the boundary conditions. And you already see that, there is an effect instead of using a simple uniaxial and bidirectional raster scan. If you use an in and out and in the medial axis transformation, okay. So the amount of heat dissipation, okay, damage you do significantly reduces by carefully, changing the path of these layer filling from the simple zigzag into the medial axial transmission. Okay, the temperature decreases significantly compared to the other scans. So this is another simulation where we carried out to simulate the temperature distribution using various the paths in which we can fill the layer. This is an LXY scan. Okay, this is an YX scan. I quickly just run through. And if you look at the summary result, the temperature distribution, you always see that here the medial axial transmission, what I talked about, always has low temperature heat accumulation compared to these any other scans. Okay, so we can optimize now. So what are the paths we'll have to create? Okay, so that we can get a bead with a minimal heat accumulation, and you'll also see that in the medial axial transmission provides least residual stress and distortion inside the component. And this is possible only by doing all these mathematical simulation and understanding the metallurgy, solidification, and influence of metallurgy on the residual stress evolution. Okay, so with that, I'll just end this talk. So these are some of the scans. So we looked at the AM process characteristics and how we'll have to understand the basics. Once we understand the basics, we can construct the physically based models for path planning, and which actually can be used very effectively to reduce the experimental efforts. So that now using these simulations, we can identify what is the best path we can take, okay, so that we can minimize the residual stress and distortion and the heat accumulation, so that the layer can be generated, okay, so without much residual stress and minimal damage to the microstructure. Good. So with that, we'll wind up this lecture. I hope the lecture what I gave is useful. And I'm sorry this is a bit fast because we had to fill a lot of concepts in a shorter time. Maybe next time I'll give you more basic fundamentals about the models. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you, guys. I hope you enjoy. And if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Any questions on my topic?
Completed, sir?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Really, on behalf of Department of Robotics and Automation Engineering and Center of Excellence in Welding and Technologies, PhD College of Technology, really, I thank Professor Murugan Amrithalingam for elaborate and excellent presentation and very update state of art of work. Really, once again, I thank you for the dedicated work really you have done, sir. We have done today on behalf of participants and Atal sponsored this course, especially FDP course on robotic welding and welding automation. I once again thank you, sir. Thank you for your support and help for the welding fraternity, especially. Okay.